about the second half of the 90s, um, the trend of managed care started shifting, and Harding Hospital and its eating disorder programming began to shift. It began to close down its inpatient, then it closed down its partial hospital, and by the end of the 90s, it only had intensive outpatient eating disorder programming left. I was directing that, but the hospital was realizing it could not stay freestanding and afloat. So Ohio State University Medical Center purchased Harding Hospital in 1999. Initially, they identified that the eating disorder program was the unique specialty that they wanted to really feature, but then just based on very common everyday issues, that had to be eliminated. And simultaneously within the state, Cleveland Clinic had closed down its partial hospital programming. Cincinnati had had an eating disorder program under Susan Woolley's work, and they had been very strong and eventually had to close down. So literally the eating disorder treatment scene was closing and withering away in Ohio. And when Harding closed its doors in 1999, there was nothing left, neither at Ohio State, not at Nationwide Children's, in Columbus, not in any of the central Ohio areas. And there was nothing left. So what happened was I was seeing a young woman.
This is a great story.
I know.
This is a great story.
I love hearing it all the time.
Totally
So
right.
I was seeing this one student who was a senior in high school. She was a twin. I'll call her Linda. And Linda was seeing me right before Harding totally closed its programming. She had been so severe in her anorexia, and we did not have an inpatient at that point, that we had referred her out of state to get inpatient eating disorder and anorexia treatment. She was able to restore body mass and came back, but because we didn't have a partial at that time, and the IOP was even getting ready to close, she had to leap from 24-hour care and trying to step back into high school her senior year and trying to deal with eating and going to school and trying to deal with it all. And the leap in the transition was way too high. And the result is, and in those days, we treated primarily just the student or the patient, requiring families to come in and expecting them to be at the table in 1980, 98, and 99 was just unheard of. They were to be individuating. Mm-hmm. And so the result is, I'm looking at her and she says to me, Dr. Hill, it's too much. I've tried, I've done everything you've asked, and it's too much. And so I just don't want to continue. I don't want to live. I don't want to do what it's taking to get over this illness. And I looked at her and in desperation said, if you will fight to live, I'll fight to open a new clinic for eating disorders. And she was very timid, and she was very mildly spoken, and she got up, she walked across my office and stood over me and said, will you shake on that? And I said, okay, and we shook on it, and then she sat down and she said, so tell me what I'm to do. And so I started in with talking about the menu that you had even established for, and I said we start there, one meal at a time. And so if you'll eat that meal, I'll agree to do what I need to do to find out how to open a clinic. And that's when I said, Sonia and Sherry and I need to meet. And so we met, and I'll just say then every week when I met with her, she would come in and sit down and say, okay, you asked me to stand up to so and you told me to eat this, even though it was so distressing to eat it, and I did. Now, what did you do, Dr. Hill, to get through the next step? And then I'd say, well, I met with the Department of Mental Health in Ohio, and I was shaking in my boots. I had no idea how to do that. But then I'd say, well, if Linda's eating her meal, I'm going to meet with this person. And she challenged me every step of the way to bring this clinic into being. And she continued to get stronger in the process. And by November, December, early December, we had our last meeting. Her mother came. We had a celebration that she had been stable in her weight. She knew how to fight to keep it going. And then she sat back and said, and you? And I said, I just signed the contract that day for the center to open in 2000, and 2001 we began. So the Center for Balanced Living began.
February 1st, 2001,
Yes.
our doors opened.
Yep.
Yes.
And we became a formal non-profit clinic on June 29th, 2000, because of Linda and what the first steps needed, and that's what we established. But first, you and I, the three of us, had a meeting, and we sat down because I didn't know what to do. And I said,
You challenged us to
That's
come up with a plan, right?
we talked about, should we open it as a profit, for-profit, or a not-for-profit? And I had no idea how to go out and get investors. I knew how to do good treatment, but I didn't know how to get investors. And there weren't investors that I knew in major investment groups and venture capital groups going on in the levels that they are today. And so we talked about it. Do we want to approach it from we are the owners and profit from the services, or do we want to make it a community-based program? And if that, instead of being people who are investing in a venture capital way, it would be foundations who believe in, and support nonprofits and their missions. And so you either have foundations invest or other individual groups invest. So we decided to make it not for profit. And it certainly has been not for profit.
Well,
But
even
many-
after looking back, when you think of the history of how we got, you were so mission driven from the beginning, Laura. I mean, the story of why you started was because of the need, and that's mission driven from the beginning. And so it's only a natural fit. I remember back then, investment groups, I mean, we'd worked in hospitals. Harding Hospital was not for profit as a hospital. Ohio State, I mean, we weren't in the business, venture capital, startups. So the only possibility is either we invest as the investors, or we go the model of trying to find a foundation. And little did we know, I don't know if you knew, what a great grant writer you are,
Yes.
Laura, and the ability to tell the story in a way that gets people to invest in the mission.
If it had not been for the Columbus Medical Association Foundation, who did not know us but believed and saw the acute need to address this illness and had no specialized area, and the Ohio Department of Mental Health very actively advocated, we received a major grant from CMAF to be able to buy the computers and our used furnitures and our staplers, and we bought the toilet paper, but they bought everything else. And we started with 4 offices and a small check-in room, and you started to start seeing all of our clients. Sherry and I brought our clients over. We had 40 hours of direct care while we then spent nights and weekends.
I was going to say, all the management of it was nights and weekends because
Yes.
we were all doing the clinical work and full-time clinical work.
Right.
And what a great partner OSU turned out to be for
my
us.
golly.
I mean,
They were
by
incredible.
leasing the space office by office, by letting us be on their network for a while.
Yes.
I mean, they were
incredible.
they were incredible. I mean, you don't have landlords who say you can rent part of this space and then
Building.
expand as you need. So we went from 4 offices to 3 buildings at the end of 11 years. So they were a great partner with us. And I was thinking about the mission of education, as you were talking about, Laura, from the very beginning. Your vision was that all donations went and other grants went to support the education mission and the research mission of the center, and the treatment portion was funded by our patient fees and our ability to bill for those services. But for a full mission of education and research, we needed support, and every dollar from day one was directed towards that. Nothing towards administrative cost. It was all directed. I mean, our support groups were supported. The Harding Foundation, which still existed even after the hospital closed, supported us in those first few years.
Yes, they did.
We had a few partners that really were helpful to us and saw the mission.
And you talk about it being mission based, and at every point of the way, whenever we saw a new need or we had a new vision, and I remember Laura was like, I have no idea how we're going to be able to do this. We just need to know that we will. And always someone or something would show up and give us that opportunity. And we did with what we had. It was almost like we knew what we needed to do, and it was going to happen regardless. And that's one of the things that I think is so unique and so wonderful, is that when we see a need, we put it out there to the community, and there's someone that always does help and want to support our mission from the community. If we didn't have the community, just like it takes a community to treat an eating disorder, it takes the community to help us continue with our mission.